She was the only daughter of the last German emperor and last king of Prussia, Wilhelm II, and his wife, Empress Augusta Victoria. Her wedding was one of the last big family gatherings before the outbreak of World War I, and she lived to see the fall of the German Empire, the Second World War and its aftermath, and would she have lived a little longer she would have also witnessed the fall of the Berlin Wall. Today we are talking about Princess Victoria Louise of Prussia. It was September 13, 1892, when Victoria Louise Adelaide Matilda Charlotte of Prussia was born at the Marble Palace in Potsdam, Germany. She was named after her great-grandmother, Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom, and her great-great-grandmother, Louise of Mecklenburg-Strelitz. But to her family, she was known as Sissy, and to her brother Oscar, she was Mouse. Shortly after her birth, her mother wrote to her diary, "After 6 sons, God has given us our 7th child, a small but very strong little daughter." She added, "Her father, who up to now only wanted sons, was very happy and is still marveling." The Kaiser was indeed very content about his daughter and used to say, "She's a chip of the old block, isn't she?" Victoria was described as intelligent like her grandmother, Victoria, Princess Royal, stately, elegant, and dignified like her mother, and imperious, willful, and stubborn like her father. She enjoyed being the center of attention and is supposed to have been her father's favorite child. Her brother, Crown Prince Wilhelm, stated, "Victoria was the only one of us who succeeded in her childhood in gaining a snug place in our father's heart." Of course, being the only daughter, little Sissy always was Daddy's little girl. Their bond was very strong and different than with his sons. While Victoria always got away with her foolish behavior, her brothers were often reprimanded for their naughtiness. It seemed like Victoria could do no wrong in her father's eyes. Victoria returned the affection towards her father and adored him. Victoria's English governess would later describe the young princess as friendly, energetic, and constantly fighting with her brother Joachim. Victoria never learned to play the piano or to paint, but she sure did know how to slide down the staircase and loved potato sack races. She developed a love for sports from a very young age and became an accomplished hunter and rider. There were not many boys her age that could beat her in running or jumping, and when their tutor yelled at a boy for acting like a girl, she would rebuke and tell him to talk more respectfully of girls. Hence, growing up with 6 brothers, Victoria always strived to be like them. They would always make her march around with a small wooden rifle. Every time the young Victoria saw an officer in uniform, she mentioned how she would also like to go to war and fight. In 1909, Victoria was made Colonel-in-Chief of the 2nd Guard Hussar Regiment. On this occasion, she wrote to her father, "When I lie in bed at night, my heart beats with joyful excitement at the thought that in 4 weeks I am to leave my regiment past you. I can never thank you enough, and I kiss your hand for bestowing me this great favor. I have always regretted not have been a boy, so as to be able to join your army, but now at least I have been consoled by your gesture." As Victoria grew older, almost every prince in Europe was cited as a possible husband for her, except the one she would go on to marry. In 1912, the Duke of Cumberland and heir to the Kingdom of Hanover, Ernest Augustus, visited Victoria's father, Emperor Wilhelm II, to thank him for letting 2 of his sons attend the funeral of his brother. The Kingdom of Hanover was conquered by Prussia during the Austro-Prussian War in 1866 and ceased to exist as an independent kingdom, becoming a Prussian province. Thus, the Hanovers were forced to put an end to their crown, and they were sure not happy about that. On this occasion, Victoria offered Ernest to show him her horses, and they hit off right away. Victoria would later go on and write in her memoirs, "It was love at first sight. I was all fire and flame." And Ernest sure returned these feelings. Victoria's mother noted in her diary, This young man has certainly left an impression on my child from the first. God knows whether it will ever come to anything. Wilhelm II believed that a marriage was exactly what was needed to end the rivalry between the two houses. After all political concerns were out of their way, they got married on May 24, 1913 in Berlin. Their wedding was one of the largest royal gatherings before the outbreak of World War I, and it was also the first royal wedding in history that was recorded. Their guests included King George V of the UK, Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, and 1,200 other attendees. The Kaiser rose his glass and said, "My darling daughter, today, as you leave our house, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all the joy you have given me and your mother, and for the ray of sunshine you have been in our house." This clearly underlined the close relationship father and daughter always had. However, the wedding was overshadowed by rumors that their love was fabricated just in order to bring the two houses back together. The new Duke and Duchess moved to Brunswick Palace, where they welcomed their first child, Prince Ernest Augustus, less than a year after their marriage. 4 more children followed in the next 9 years: Prince George William, Princess Frederica, Prince Christian Oscar, and Prince Wilf Henry. While her husband and all of her brothers were out fighting in World War I, Victoria spent her time caring for the wounded soldiers, turning Brunswick Palace into a hospital. On November 8, 1918, a day before her father, Wilhelm II, was forced to abdicate, Victoria's husband had to give up his rights to the throne of Brunswick, and the duchy was abolished. Coming close to the end of World War I, many other German kings and princes and so on were forced to abdicate their thrones. Shortly after this tragedy, Victoria fell sick with the Spanish flu, but gladly recovered. The family then managed to escape to Austria, where they lived for the next few years. Tragedy struck again when in 1920 Victoria's brother committed suicide, and not even a year later her mother died. Victoria's father, despite being heartbroken, remarried only 2 years later to the much younger Hermine Royce. Victoria tried talking her father out of the wedding, but when they nevertheless married, she refused to attend. When the Nazi Party arose in Germany, 2 of Victoria's brothers, Crown Prince Wilhelm and Prince August Wilhelm, joined them. While her husband Ernest never joined the Nazi Party, he donated funds and was close to several of their leaders. In the mid-1930s, Adolf Hitler himself asked the couple to arrange a marriage between their daughter Frederica and the later Edward VIII. His intention was to build up the old alliance between Germany and the UK. Although Victoria and Ernest were keen on a reunification between the 2 countries, they refused to marry off their daughter to the 22-year-older Prince of Wales. In the middle of World War II, Victoria's father, Wilhelm, who had lived in the Netherlands since his abdication, suddenly fell ill. Victoria and several of her brothers traveled to Doorn to visit their father, who had recovered by that time. The siblings departed from Doorn when Wilhelm II relapsed. Victoria returned in time to be at her father's bedside when he died on June 4, 1941. After the end of the Second World War, Victoria spent a lot of her time attending public events, high society parties, and hunting. In 1953, Ernest died at Marienburg Castle with Victoria by his side. After her husband's death, Victoria published several books. However, it is believed she used the help of a ghostwriter for this. Some of her books are about her life, while others are biographies of her mother and sister-in-law. Victoria also remained very popular in Germany for the rest of her life. Victoria died on December 11, 1980, at the age of 88. She was the last surviving child of Wilhelm II. Victoria is buried with her husband in front of the royal mausoleum in the Burggarten at Herrenhausen Gardens in Hanover. This is also the burial place for Ernest Augustus, King of Hanover, and of George I of Great Britain after his reburial after World War II. Through her daughter Frederica, who married Paul of Greece, she is the grandmother to the former Queen Consort of Spain, Sophia, and thus an ancestor to the Spanish royal family. She is also the grandmother to Constantine II, who was the last king of the Hellenists. Her son George William married Princess Sophie of Greece and Denmark, sister to the late Prince Philip.